I'm joined today by Tim Franklin and Barry Smale from Fully Alive, and we're going to have a chat about their experience of Qigong within Fully Alive. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for having us on, John.
Our pleasure. We have 5 standard questions that we ask people, just so we can get a feel for how everything is in different schools with different approaches. So I was just wondering if you'd individually like to introduce yourself, tell us a bit how you found Qigong, and maybe how Qigong found you. So how did you find Qigong to start with?
Shall I go first? Well,
Yeah,
my name's Barry Smale. So worked in industry for a long time. I now work as a psychotherapist. So I work in a psychiatric hospital up in London, and Qigong definitely found me. I think it was in about 96, I think. Just doing I was out doing a retreat on the edge of the Sedona Desert in Tucson, doing some just simple salute to the sun. And whenever, it was like 5 o'clock in the morning, watching the sun come up, and whenever I would just come back to that upright and relaxing stance, I just noticed all this weird stuff started to go on. Felt like ants were crawling up and down my legs. I thought it felt like water was trickling down. And I just used to giggle, really, because all this weird stuff was going on. And then when I came back to London, I was talking to different people about it, and they said, oh, that sounds a lot like what they describe happens in Qigong. So I bought Master Lam Kam Chun's book, The Way of Energy, and that started 2 years of rather, shall we say, interesting experiences. But then in the end, I found, I practiced Falun Gong actually for a while. But then I found Grandmaster Wong who's mine and Tim's kind of teacher. And everything started to make sense after that. I started to be able to use it rather than just play with it. Mm-hmm. What about you, Tim?
Well, hi, I'm Tim Franklin. And well, I went looking for Qigong. I used to be in industry for a long, long time, but also my background was in martial arts. And I wanted to go and find a master, more like Mr. Miyagi. It was like a childhood thing. I wanted to go and find a Mr. Miyagi. So I went traveling around the world, trying to find somebody, and couldn't find anyone. And then I came back to the UK. And I'd read stuff before, which is why I was sort of going in search. And then came back, and in my local community hall was a poster for Shaolin Kung Fu. So I was, literally like 50 yards from my house. I was like, this is unbelievable. I've just been around the world, couldn't find anyone. Just right there. And this chap introduced me to Grandmaster Wong. So I went over to Malaysia and trained with him over there. And then he came to the UK and I trained with him here. And yeah, that was around 20 years ago. And that completely changed things for me. And I went from doing lots of external things to suddenly finding the world of energy. And I'd found the world of energy through my therapy, because I work as a therapist, as a zero balancer. And so we work with body and energy. So I was used to working with energy, but I just couldn't find it in the martial arts side of the world, but I knew it was there. And then that's when we started training the martial arts and the Qigong, the way of the energy as well. So yeah, that was my introduction to Qigong. And yeah, it's been amazing journey, really. Still continuing.
Wonderful. It's interesting how you sort of start on the journey and then you find something that really twigs for you. There's something that sort of really fits in. And it's not necessarily going to be the first thing that you come across either, is it? It's
yeah.
But yeah. Oh. When you find it, I guess you just grab it, don't you, and go for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh-huh. Okay, well, the next thing I want to ask is, what do you love about Qigong? So yeah. What do you love about Qigong?
Well, do you know, there is a lot of things that I love about Qigong, but when I look back about what I love about Qigong, it's more what I've left behind in my life that was getting in the way. And so one can look at all the things that we get from Qigong, but actually the things that I really enjoy now is that sense of ease, that sense of flow, and that sense of being much more, well, I'd say much more curious and engaging in the stuff that I do on a day-to-day level now. And I was working in sales. I had a very successful company. And even though there was monetary success, there wasn't the happiness side. And it took the practice of Qigong to realize all the great things that are going on in life after all of these things start to seem to fall away. So I've got a lot to be thankful about Qigong, but I love what it's brought. I love what it's brought in terms of my health and my happiness. And my wife and my kids are very much appreciative of that as well.
Yes.
I think I've become a much better husband and father as a result of the practice of Qigong.
Yeah.
Yeah, Barry?
And well, I think it's the same for me. I'm in recovery, so I gave up alcohol a number of years ago, around about the same time actually that Qigong found me. And I mean, Qigong was just, it was so powerful in terms of me getting beyond myself, really, just having a bigger experience just than my old self. So I loved that. I also loved the fact that, I mean, I trained in a few different things. So shamanism as well, I trained in. And for me, Qigong was it prepared me and was a window into the whole of that world of energy and spirit. But probably actually now, I think the thing I love about it the most is the effect it has on other people when we teach them. For a long time, I taught Qigong in a psychiatric hospital where I was working. And the number of times it would get to the end of a session and these people would just be sitting there looking fairly blissed out. And somebody would say, "Oh my God, that's the first time I haven't had any thoughts in my head for as long as I can remember." And just the peace and the relaxation in them, that was worthwhile, you know. So being able to bring that to people is fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I completely hear you on that. And it's one of the joys of doing this is that you hear such amazing responses, and everyone who comes out with a response as you have, I'm sort of sitting here going, wow, why hadn't I thought of that? So so thank you. Okay, the next thing I want to look at is lineage forms. There's a question that's sort of going around about lineage forms. Do you adhere to lineage forms? What are your feelings about lineage forms? And what are lineage forms as well?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, isn't it? I'll start with it. I mean, yes, we are in a lineage, you know, whether we like it or not, we're in a lineage. So we learned from Grandmaster Wong Kiew, yeah? And he learned from an old Chinese Malaysian guy who learned from an old Chinese guy who learned, and that lineage goes back to the Shaolin Temple. So our teacher can trace his lineage back to the Shaolin Temple. So we're in that lineage, you know, whether we like it or not. And that lineage is an oral tradition where people are passing down their understanding. And then it's a transmission lineage as well, where they're transmitting their energy skills, which is what Qigong is ultimately. So at that level, we're in a lineage. In terms of lineage form, my personal view is we can all get a bit, shall we say, anal about whether that finger's supposed to be there or there. You know, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know what works for me, you know. I know it's better to have a, you know, decent structure without collapsing but relaxing, yeah. And I know, you know, there is a thing around called the 18 Lohan hands, and there's lots of depictions of that, and we certainly teach the 18 Lohan hands. And then there are lots of other things like bone marrow cleansing and sinew metamorphosis. But in the for me, it's not so much about form; it's about skill. You know, I mean, it's like the skill of playing tennis. You know, I can do that, and that's the form of a topspin forehand. But I wouldn't ever confuse it for the skill of playing tennis. You know. So for me, it's more about skills, really. But we are in a lineage as well.
Yeah, Tim.
Yeah, so when I went in search of my master, I was after looking for somebody as the real deal, and the real deal in terms of things like that are getting somebody that's from the Shaolin Temple or somebody that's got that connection for Shaolin Temple. And I felt very drawn to the Shaolin tradition, and I didn't really understand why at the time. Anyway, I just thought it was a cool thing. And as Barry says, there's no escaping that we have that lineage. But the interesting thing is, well, a couple of things. One is, yes, we're still unfolding after 20 years the stuff that got passed on by Bodhidharma, the first patriarch of the Shaolin Temple. And we've been going through these forms and exercises and the breath and the skills thousands and thousands of times over, yet they're still showing us something new after all this time. So from one point of view, there's a lot to still to understand from the lineage that got passed down from these people that seem to not just do it as a hobby, but literally spent their whole life investigating the energy arts. Yeah. So it's like, there's still a load to learn from there beyond, as Barry says, getting the form right with the finger or the certain move. The other part is that it doesn't really matter. Yeah. What doesn't matter about it, and I'll, if I can, I'll tell you a quick story about why that doesn't matter. What doesn't matter is as long as somebody gets the benefit. Okay. Now, my Sifu, Grandmaster Wong, one of his teachers was absolutely anal about form. I mean, you imagine the old kung fu movies, everybody's like ready. And so he's taught Qigong, but very much strict Qigong form, doing everything right. And then he then started to learn it more as an energy art and healing art. And he had a cancer patient once. And the person came in and they said, oh, you know, I haven't got long to live and blah, blah. And he showed her lifting the sky. Yeah, the very basic exercise of Qigong. And he showed her the form. And she said, oh, very good. And she went off and practiced this, he thought. She came back several months later, said, it's amazing news. I've no longer got my cancer. He said, oh, that's absolutely fantastic. She said, yeah, I've had all these test results. I'm clear. He said, that's amazing. That's beautiful. Show me what you've been practicing. And this was her lifting the sky. Yeah, she'd forgot what it showed him. But what she did do is she was enjoying her practice and she was able to generate an energy flow. And he had one of these eureka moments then that changed the way that then he taught lineage Qigong, which is, yes, you can do all the forms and get them right, but actually that doesn't really matter. As long as you can generate an energy flow and enjoy your practice, you get the benefits. And so we found many ways of actually teaching the forms that we do. And sometimes we change the forms according to the needs of the moment or the student that's there. There's no right or wrong, unless we think that forms have to be a certain way, in which case they're definitely wrong. But otherwise, as long as the person's getting the benefit, so what lineage? Because ultimately we all come from the same lineage.
Yeah.
There's no escaping that either. So we can pretend that we've created our own Qigong or that we've got a better Qigong, but it's all coming from source in the beginning, isn't it? It's all coming from somewhere. A multitude of people that have spent a lifetime creating things that work. So that'd be my lineage answer for you.
It's a great, well, they're both great answers. I'm interested in this piece of that last comment about, you know, making sure they work, because I think that really to me it's such a big, well, it's such a small statement, but such a huge statement as well, because I think that's it. One of the powers that sit within the older traditions is that they can continue to challenge you.
Yes.
And yeah, it's a
always
fascinating piece. The next question I was going to ask, we've already answered.
Sorry about that.
Oh well, because I was going to ask, what have you gained from Qigong? But I'd like to go slightly off script here, because one of the things that I hear is this term Sifu. And some schools use it and some schools don't use it. And I was wondering if you could sort of say something to that.
Sure. Our teacher, our Sifu, comes from a traditional lineage, and he's very much a traditional Chinese Malay. And from that, the Sifu is there as like the father figure, the teacher, to show the way as such. So then the word Sifu is then, from his point of view, just a mark of respect of student to teacher. Sometimes we use the term Sifu because our teacher gave us the permission to teach and said, now you are Sifus. Yeah. And other people don't use the term Sifu, they just call us Barry or Tim, which is also fine, because we're also, you know, not stuck to do that. So sometimes it gets used and it seems appropriate, and other times it doesn't. But it doesn't really mean anything more that I'm no longer Tim or Barry's no longer Barry. But it just could be like if you're at school, and rather than call the person by their first name, you might say Miss, Mr, Sir, you know, something like that as well. Yeah. So so it's more, I think, more of comes down of the lineage of traditional respect and a recognition that the person that's teaching you has accomplished something that at this moment in time that you may not have got or understood.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, yes, I'd agree with Tim. I suppose kind of adding to that, you know, what he said, this term, Sifu, Shifu, this father teacher, I think that was one of the things that I noticed very much with Grandmaster Wong Kit was, you know, he treated you like a son. Yeah. He treated you like a son. He's like, if you were prepared to learn from him and he was prepared to teach you, that was a real relationship. That wasn't this kind of Mac Dojo thing where someone gives you a $5 and you come along, make these movements and that's it. He took it really seriously. You entered into that relationship with him, and if you emailed him, he would email you back, and he genuinely wanted the best. That was what I always got the sense from him, was that he genuinely wanted the best for me. He wasn't telling me how to live my life, but when I went to learn Qigong from him and I was investigating my Qigong, he genuinely wanted me to be well. Yeah. He genuinely wanted me to have loads of vitality. He genuinely wanted me, you know, to be clear in my mind. He genuinely wanted me to have a kind of lightness of spirit. There was, and whenever he taught, that shone through. And I hope that students get the same sense from Tim and I. That's the way that we look at it anyway. Hopefully they pick that up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a wonderful answer. I've operated in some schools where the term Sifu or Shifu is considered not to be appropriate, and others where it is. And it's great to just hear that, because it clarifies it so well. And again, there's that. I like the idea of a McDojo where you go along and you pay your $5. I'll have to make sure I don't use that anywhere, just in case I'm offensive. So yeah. Okay. So we also ask the people who are coming into the One Chi project to share something with us. So sort of we ask for it to be like a 2-minute practice. Now, in all honesty, there's very few practices that only last 2 minutes. But is there something that either or both of you would like to share?
Yes, well, I'll share a bit and then Tim will share a bit. So fundamentally, the way that we experience and the way that we look at Qigong and the way that we've been taught is about energy skill. Yeah. So yes, it's great to move through the clearing, building and nourishing skills, but the fundamental skill is being able to generate an energy flow. It's like trying to use a pressure hose if you haven't turned the tap on. Yeah. So the fundamental skill is being able to generate an energy flow. And the best way to do that, we have found, and as was passed on to us, is a term that we coined in the end, I suppose, was the absence of unnecessary tension. So it's the absence of unnecessary tension in the body, the absence of unnecessary tension in the emotions, and the same in the mind. So one way that you can practice this at the physical level is if you clasp your hands like that, yeah, then that's in a structure, yeah, and you can feel that structure, yeah. And one of the ways that you can practice the absence of unnecessary tension is just to start to release tension in the hands, but without changing the structure. And most people, you can start to feel, oh yeah, actually, when I first put my hands together, there was tension there that was actually unnecessary. My structure is still the same, yeah, which is important. This is not about collapsing, but it's holding a structure and gradually developing the skill of the absence of unnecessary tension. So for us, that's you can practice that, and then you transfer it to your Wuji stance. So I'll pass it across.
That's what I would show. So we have a Wuji stance in our school, Fully Alive, which is working from the principle of the absence of unnecessary tension. So whilst in Tai Chi or other schools, it's a wider stance, like a wider stance to start from, we actually start from a narrow stance. And there's a number of reasons to start from this stance. One is it's easier to get energy flowing, whereas this tends to root more, and we want to get energy flowing. And the other thing is it works with the body being neutrally stacked. So literally the bones end up sitting on top of each other in a way that they're aligned without the muscles having to lengthen or shorten. Just compare for a moment when you do this and just become aware, if you like, of the muscles in the legs, the shins, the backside, and your lower back, that they're having to effort in order to hold yourself in that position. That's not a bad position. It's actually a very good position to be standing in. It can be very good for building energy. But when you compare it to standing like this, where the feet are parallel and not splayed out, because this ends up shortening or lengthening muscles, you get that antagonist, that the feet are parallel about a fist width apart. And then make sure your knees aren't jammed back. So lots of people jam their knees back. You jam your knees back, that ends up tightening the muscles in your thighs. So you unlock the knees, but not collapsing them. And then from here, you just make sure that the body's in an uprighting position. We make a whole load of words up in Fully Alive, like uprighting, because you don't have to try and hold yourself still. Because if you're holding yourself, that's not the absence of unnecessary tension. Actually, standing just uprighting, relaxing, where the body's neutrally stacked, gives then the body and the system the opportunity to release held tensions, and that encourages energy to flow without actually having to do anything. The other thing is that the hands for most people, tend to be like as if they're going for the guns or the pockets. Whereas what we encourage to do is just bring the hands to the sides of the body like they would be at the seams of the trousers, but not touching the trousers, just slightly away. And now the arms are just gently relaxed and the chest is open, so the heart and lung meridians are open without actually having to pull the chest back. Because if you compare that to pulling the chest back, there's efforting. So standing uprighting, relaxing with the absence of unnecessary tension just means you're in a Wuji neutral stance without actually having to do anything. So right straight away at the very physical level, we've already got a sense of being more physically relaxed. If you, not that we've got time today to do this, but if you then did close your eyes, allow the breath to be relaxed, the mind, the emotions to be relaxed, entered into a Qigong state of mind, you will then probably start to notice energy flowing and movement happening. But right now, just standing up, writing and relaxing, you get a sense of that relaxation. So that's a very quick snippet of standing and relaxing. Now, we could spend half an hour on that.
Yeah, it's very easy to. Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and I would love to come along to some of your sessions. So how can people find you?
Well, the website is shaolin-training.com. So shaolin-training.com, or email info@fullyalive.co. There's no UK or .com on the end of that, it's just .co. So info@fullyalive.co. That will find its way to Barry and myself then. And then you
Wonderful.
can check out the different things there.
Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate you sort of giving some time to the One Chi project. And yeah.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a great project. And we thank you for pulling it all together. So thanks.